The message arrived on Earth on a Tuesday morning, carried by a sleek alien probe that appeared in orbit without warning. The probe was beautiful in a cold way. Silver metal that seemed to flow like liquid, covered in patterns that hurt human eyes to look at directly. It broadcast its message in perfect English, somehow knowing humanity's primary language despite never having made contact before. "Greetings, primitive beings of the third planet." The voice was smooth and filled with amusement. "I am Speaker, Nexthul of the Great Zeltharian Empire. Your small collection of worlds has been noticed by our glorious civilization. You will submit to imperial rule within one rotation of your planet or face complete removal from existence." The probe's message played on every screen across Earth and its colonies. People stopped in the streets to watch as holographic displays showed the speaker, a tall, elegant being with silver skin and 4 arms, wearing robes that seemed to be made of captured starlight. Behind the alien, vast ships moved through space like floating cities, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. "We have observed your pathetic attempts at civilization," Speaker Nexthul continued, his tone like an adult talking to a small child. "Your ships crawl through space using chemical explosions. Your weapons throw metal projectiles like ancient savages. Your fastest messages take years to travel between your worlds. The Empire finds your efforts amusing." In the background of the message, alien beings could be seen laughing. Not cruel laughter, but the kind reserved for watching cute animals try to do human tasks. To them, humanity was nothing more than an interesting discovery, like finding a tribe that still used stone tools. President Sarah Martinez called an emergency meeting of the Colonial Council within hours. Representatives from Mars, Europa, Titan, and the outer mining stations connected through quantum communication links, humanity's most advanced technology, and apparently still primitive by alien standards. "Options?" President Martinez asked, her face grim on the main screen. "We could try diplomatic contact," suggested Dr. James Harrison, Earth's chief xenobiologist. "Maybe they don't understand that we're intelligent beings with our own rights and culture." General Patricia Stone, head of Earth Defense Forces, shook her head. "Ma'am, I've run the numbers. Our most powerful ships carry nuclear weapons that might scratch the paint on those alien vessels. Our kinetic weapons would bounce off their hulls like throwing rocks at a tank." "What about the experimental fusion drives on the new destroyers?" asked Captain Liu Wei from the Titan shipyards. "Experimental being the key word," General Stone replied. "We have maybe 6 ships that could reach significant fractions of light speed, and their weapons are barely more advanced than what we used a century ago. Against what we just saw, we might as well throw paper airplanes at a hurricane." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the terrible mathematics of their situation. Humanity had spread across the solar system, built cities on distant moons, and thought themselves masters of their small corner of space. Now they discovered they were nothing more than insects that had attracted the attention of giants. On Mars, Governor Elena Vasquez watched the alien message replay for the dozenth time. The Martian colonies had always prided themselves on their independence and technological innovation. The Red Planet's shipyards produced humanity's finest vessels, powered by fusion reactors that could accelerate ships to impressive speeds. To human eyes, these ships were marvels of engineering. To the aliens, they were probably no more impressive than wooden sailboats. "Sir," her aide interrupted her thoughts, "we're receiving reports from all our deep space monitoring stations. There's something else." The aide activated a holographic display showing space around Earth. Dozens of new contacts appeared, massive shapes dropping out of what could only be faster than light travel. Each ship dwarfed Earth's mightiest vessels. They arranged themselves, in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with energy shields that bent light around them. "They're not even hiding from us," Governor Vasquez whispered. "They want us to see how hopeless this is." Across the galaxy, the news of humanity's discovery, spread through the Zeltharian Empire's communication networks. On the capital world of Zelth Prime, citizens gathered in public spaces to watch the amusing footage of the primitive species they had found. "Look at their ships," one citizen laughed, pointing at images of Earth's defense fleet. "They still use reaction drives, chemical combustion. My personal transport has better engines than their military vessels. And their weapons," another added, "solid projectiles propelled by explosive powder. How quaint. It's like finding a species that still hunts with spears and thinks themselves mighty warriors." The footage that entertained the Empire most was humanity's response to the ultimatum. Earth's leaders had sent diplomatic messages through every communication method they could manage. Radio waves, laser signals, even primitive quantum transmissions. All of it pathetically slow by galactic standards. Emperor Vex-Tar himself had watched the human response from his throne room, surrounded by advisors who could barely contain their laughter. The Emperor was ancient by human standards, having ruled for over 600 Earth years. He had overseen the conquest of dozens of worlds, the absorption of countless species into the Empire. "They offer us trade agreements," the Emperor mused, reading through humanity's desperate communications. "They want to share their unique cultural perspectives and technological innovations. What could these primitives possibly offer us? Better ways to burn chemical fuel?" His military advisor, Grand Admiral Korthak, stepped forward. "Your Magnificence, they seem to believe their fusion technology is impressive. They mention achieving speeds of up to 15% of light velocity, as if this were a significant accomplishment." The throne room erupted in polite alien laughter. The Empire's courier ships routinely traveled at thousands of times light speed. Their military vessels could cross the galaxy in months, rather than the millennia it would take humanity's fastest ships. "How many ships shall we send to remove this minor obstacle?" Admiral Korthak asked. "I estimate a single dreadnought would suffice to eliminate their entire species." Emperor Vex-Tar considered this. The humans amused him with their primitive determination, their quaint attempts at diplomacy. It would almost be a shame to destroy them too quickly. "Send a battle group," he decided. "Let them see the futility of resistance. Perhaps some will survive to serve as slaves or specimens for our scientists. Such primitive determination might have entertainment value. As you command, Your Magnificence." Back on Earth, humanity's leaders worked through the night, crafting response after response. Every message they sent seemed to amuse their alien observers more. Radio signals that would take hours to reach the alien fleet. Desperate offers of cooperation and surrender. Pathetic displays of their most advanced technology. The aliens responded to none of it. President Martinez stood at the window of the orbital defense station, watching Earth turn slowly below. Somewhere out there, beyond the range of human sensors, alien ships prepared for what could only be called extermination. "Ma'am," her aide said quietly, "Admiral Chen is requesting permission to proceed with Protocol 7. Martinez closed her eyes. Protocol 7 was humanity's most closely guarded secret, known only to a handful of people across all the colonies. For decades, while the public focus remained on conventional technology, a small group of scientists had been working on something else entirely, something that broke every known law of physics. "Tell Admiral Chen," Martinez said, "that Earth grants full authorization. God help us all." 24 hours had passed since the ultimatum. The alien fleet was moving toward Earth, confident in their overwhelming superiority. They had no idea what was about to happen. The Zeltharian battle group dropped out of hyperspace with the precision of a perfectly executed military maneuver. 12 massive warships materialized in Earth's outer system, their hulls gleaming with energy fields that made space itself shimmer around them. Each vessel was over 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Grand Admiral Korthak stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Inevitable Conquest, watching Earth grow larger on the main display. The small, Blue World looked so peaceful, so helpless. Its tiny moon orbited serenely, unaware that both celestial bodies would soon be nothing more than expanding clouds of superheated gas. "Sir," his sensor officer reported, "we're detecting the human fleet moving to intercept us. 37 vessels, largest ones measuring approximately 800 meters. The bridge crew shared amused glances. The humans were actually going to fight. It was like watching ants try to battle a boot. "Their weapons?" Admiral Korthak asked, though he already knew the answer would be entertaining. "Kinetic projectiles? Fusion warheads. Some kind of particle beam weapons that appear to be—" "Sir, this can't be right. Are they using focused gamma radiation as weapons?" "How delightfully primitive," Korthak laughed. "Gamma rays against quantum deflection shields. They might as well throw rocks at us." The human fleet spread out in what their military probably considered a battle formation. Admiral Korthak had to admit they showed courage, even if it was the foolish courage of the ignorant. Their ships accelerated toward the Zeltharian battle group at speeds that must have seemed impressive to them, nearly 20% of light speed. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the lead human vessel. Put it through." I'm curious to hear their last words. The image of a human female appeared on the main screen. She wore a military uniform and had short gray hair, her face lined with years of command. Her eyes held no fear, which surprised Korthak. Most primitive species showed terror when faced with the Empire's might. "This is Admiral Lisa Chen of the Earth Defense Force," the human said. "You have entered our system without permission and threatened our people. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The Zeltharian bridge erupted in laughter. The consequences? What could these chemical-powered primitives possibly do to ships protected by quantum barriers and armed with planet killers? "Human, Admiral," Korthak replied, his voice filled with condescending amusement. "Your bravery is noted and will be remembered in our historical records. However, your species' time has ended. Surrender now, and perhaps some of your people will be allowed to serve the Empire as slaves." "Counteroffer," Admiral Chen said, her voice steady. "Leave our system now, and we won't show you what we've really been working on for the past 50 years. And what might that be? Better ways to explode chemicals in space? Admiral Chen smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Something like that. The transmission ended, leaving the Zeltharian bridge in silence for a moment before the laughter resumed. The human admiral had spirit. Korthak would give her that. It was almost a pity to destroy such entertaining primitives. "Begin the attack," he ordered. "Target their largest ships first. Let's make this quick." The Zeltharian vessels opened fire, with weapons that could boil oceans. Beams of coherent energy lanced across space, each one carrying enough power to vaporize a mountain. Quantum torpedoes followed, reality-bending weapons that could punch through any known defense. The human ships disappeared, not destroyed, not vaporized. They simply weren't there anymore. "Report!" Admiral Korthak barked, his amusement turning to confusion. "Sir, I don't understand the readings. The human ships were there, then they weren't. No explosion, no debris field, no energy signature from destroyed vessels. They just stopped existing in our sensor range. Cloaking technology? No, sir. Cloaked ships still register mass, gravitational effects, sometimes heat signatures. These ships aren't hidden. They're gone." Admiral Korthak stared at the empty space where moments before 37 human vessels had been closing for battle. This made no sense. No known technology could simply make objects disappear without leaving any trace. "Sir?" The sensor officer's voice was strained now. "I'm detecting massive spatial distortions throughout the system. Something is happening to space itself." The first crack appeared near Mars. It looked like a line drawn with black ink across the stars, perfectly straight and impossibly dark. Then more cracks appeared. near Jupiter, in the asteroid belt, around Earth itself. The cracks began to widen, revealing glimpses of something beyond normal space. "What in the name of the eternal void is that?" Admiral Korthak whispered. The cracks spread like breaks in glass, forming geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Through the widening tiers, impossible colors bled into normal space. Colors that had no names, that human and Zeltharian eyes had never been designed to see. The inevitable conquest's quantum computers began producing error messages. Advanced. Sensors designed to detect particles that existed for nanoseconds were registering readings that made no mathematical sense. Temperature gauges showed measurements both above and below absolute zero simultaneously. Gravitational detectors claimed that up and down had reversed in several locations. "Admiral," his science officer called out, panic creeping into his voice, "our hyperspace navigation computers are failing. The dimensional charts are showing locations that can't exist. According to our instruments, we're somehow in 17 different places at once." Through the largest tear, something vast moved in the darkness beyond. Not a ship, something alive, something that existed in dimensions that normal space couldn't contain. It turned what might have been attention toward the Zeltharian fleet, and every warrior on every bridge felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. "Sir, incoming transmission from—" "I don't know where it's coming from. The signal is originating from everywhere at once." Admiral Chen's face appeared again on the main screen, but something was wrong with the image. Sometimes she appeared to be speaking before her lips moved. Sometimes her reflection in her uniform's metallic buttons showed a completely different person. Sometimes there were two of her, having a conversation with herself. "Admiral Korthak," she said, her voice carrying strange harmonics. "Allow me to introduce you to humanity's real technology. We call it dimensional engineering." "Impossible," Korthak breathed. "No species has ever mastered dimensional manipulation. The mathematics alone would require what? Computers? We used human brains, hundreds of them, linked together, working as living quantum processors. While your empire perfected known physics, we rewrote the laws that govern reality itself." The human ships began reappearing, but they were wrong. Some existed in multiple locations simultaneously. Others phased in and out of reality like breathing. One ship appeared to be inside out, its interior hull facing space, while its crew somehow remained unharmed in the impossibility. "You see, Admiral," Chen continued, "your people made an assumption about us. You thought our primitive technology meant we were primitive thinkers. You never considered that we might have chosen simple tools while we developed complex theories." The largest tear in space widened further, and through it came humanity's true fleet. Ships that existed partially outside normal dimensions, immune to conventional weapons because they weren't entirely in the same reality as their targets. Vessels that could step outside the universe itself, making distance and time meaningless concepts. But most terrifying were the beings that came with them. Things that lived in the spaces between dimensions, entities of pure thought and mathematics that fed on ordered reality. Humanity had found them in the dark places between worlds and somehow made allies of them. Our communications were never primitive, Admiral, Chen explained as impossible ships arranged themselves around the Zeltharian fleet. Electromagnetic waves were the only signals that could reach across dimensional barriers. While you used quantum entanglement for instant communication within reality, we were coordinating with fleets scattered across multiple realities. The first Zeltharian ship to fire at the human fleet simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, edited out of reality as if it had never been built. The quantum computers of the remaining ships couldn't even process what had happened, simply registering the event as mathematical impossibility. "You wanted to see our real technology," Admiral Chen said, her image fracturing across dimensions as she spoke. "Congratulations, Admiral. You're about to witness what happens when a species stops playing by the universe's rules. Space itself began to burn as the dimensional tiers widened further. Reality was becoming unstable around Earth, but somehow the planet remained unharmed, protected by fields that bent the laws of physics like suggestions rather than absolutes. Admiral. Korthak realized with growing horror that humanity had never intended to fight a conventional battle. They had spent decades preparing for something far more terrible, a war that would be fought not with energy and matter, but with the fundamental forces that held existence together. "All ships," he ordered, his voice barely steady. "Retreat. To minimum safe distance. Alert the Empire. We're dealing with something beyond our understanding." The thing that emerged from the largest dimensional tear defied every law of physics the Zeltharian Empire had spent millennia perfecting. It wasn't a ship in any sense that Admiral Korthak could understand. It was a structure of pure impossibility, existing in too many dimensions for normal space to contain. Its hull seemed to be made of crystallized mathematics, equations that wrote and rewrote themselves across its surface in patterns that made experienced starship officers vomit when they tried to focus on them. The vessel measured exactly 17 kilometers long, 3 kilometers long, and somehow both measurements were correct simultaneously. "What are we looking at?" whispered Commander Zexhai, Korthak's second-in-command, his forearms trembling as he gripped his control station. "According to our sensors," the science officer reported, her voice breaking, "we're looking at a ship that exists in the past, present, and future all at once. The mass readings show negative weight, infinite density, and somehow both readings are accurate. Admiral, this violates every known law of reality." Admiral Korthak forced himself to look at the impossible vessel. As he watched, parts of it seemed to exist yesterday, while other sections were clearly experiencing tomorrow. The ship's weapons weren't mounted on its hull. They were woven into the fabric of space-time itself. "Sir," communications reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet, but according to our analysis, the message was sent 3 hours before we arrived in this system. Put it through." Admiral Chen's image appeared again, but now she was clearly visible through the transparent walls of her ship's bridge. Behind her, human crew members worked at control stations that looked like they were built from folded space. Some of her officers appeared to be the same person at different ages, working in perfect coordination with themselves. "Admiral Korthak," Chen began, "let me explain what you're seeing. 50 years ago, humanity discovered something your empire never looked for: the spaces between dimensions. While you perfected travel through hyperspace, we learned to step outside space entirely." She gestured, and the display changed to show what looked like a technical schematic, though the diagram seemed to be drawn in colors that didn't exist. "Your ships are impressive by three-dimensional standards," Chen continued. "But we stopped limiting ourselves to 3 dimensions decades ago. Our vessels exist in 11-dimensional space, which makes them effectively invulnerable to weapons that only function in normal reality. One of the human ships demonstrated by allowing a Zeltharian plasma cannon to fire directly through its bridge. The energy beam passed through the human vessel like it was made of light, causing no damage whatsoever. The ship wasn't even there in the same dimensional layer as the weapon." "But Admiral," Chen said, her tone becoming darker, "the real discovery wasn't dimensional engineering. It was what we found living in the spaces between realities." The dimensional tiers widened further, and through them came things that had no names in any language. Beings of pure consciousness that existed as living mathematics, entities that fed on the ordered reality of normal space. They moved through the tiers like enormous serpents made of crystallized thought, their presence causing reality to bend and warp around them. "Meet our allies," Admiral Chen said. "They call themselves the Architects of Entropy. They've been trapped in the spaces between dimensions for eons, starving because they need ordered reality to survive. We offered them a deal: help us defend ourselves, and we'll give them access to any civilization foolish enough to threaten us." Admiral Korthak watched in horror as one of the entropy beings approached a Zeltharian destroyer. The creature didn't attack the ship. It simply touched it with something that might have been a tentacle made of pure possibility. The destroyer began to change, its ordered structure becoming chaos. Metal flowed like water, energy systems became abstract art, and the crew experienced their entire lives backward and forward simultaneously before simply ceasing to be. "You see, Admiral," Chen explained, "your empire made a fundamental error. You assumed that because our ships looked primitive, our science was primitive too. You never considered that we might have been hiding our real capabilities." The human fleet began to move, and their movement broke every rule of physics. Ships traveled by folding space around themselves, making the concept of distance meaningless. Others simply stepped through dimensions, appearing instantly at their destinations without crossing the space between. Some vessels seemed to arrive at their positions before they had left their original locations. Our fusion drives, our kinetic weapons, our chemical propulsion, Chen continued. Those weren't limitations. They were camouflage. We made sure any species that discovered us would see exactly what we wanted them to see. A primitive civilization not worth worrying about. Admiral Korthak realized the terrible truth. Humanity's apparent primitiveness had been a deliberate deception spanning decades. While the galaxy laughed at their crude technology, human scientists had been quietly solving the ultimate mysteries of existence itself. "Sir," his tactical officer called out, "the humans are powering weapons, but I can't identify what kind. Our sensors are reading energy signatures that shouldn't be possible." "Those aren't energy weapons," Chen said, having somehow heard the private communication. "Those are causality weapons. They don't fire projectiles or beams. They fire consequences. For example, we can fire the result of your ship exploding without actually causing an explosion." To demonstrate, one of the human vessels targeted a Zeltharian cruiser. Nothing visible fired from the human ship, but the cruiser suddenly experienced the aftermath of a catastrophic explosion that had never actually happened. The crew found themselves floating in space, their ship debris around them, but they couldn't remember any explosion occurring. "The mathematics are complex," Chen admitted, "but the concept is simple. We fire the effect and let reality work backward to create a cause. Your ship was destroyed. Therefore, something must have destroyed it, so something did. The entropy beings were spreading throughout the system now, their alien intelligence processing the ordered reality of normal space and finding it delicious. Wherever they moved, physics became suggestions rather than laws. They weren't malevolent, they were simply hungry, and ordered civilizations were their natural food source." "Please understand, Admiral," Chen said. "We didn't want this conflict. We tried diplomacy. We offered trade and cooperation. But your empire decided we were primitives to be conquered or destroyed." Admiral Korthak found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "What do you want from us?" "Nothing," Chen replied. "We want nothing from you. We don't need your technology, your resources, or your territory. We're not conquerors, Admiral. We're protectors. And we've just demonstrated what happens to anyone who threatens what we protect." Another Zeltharian. Ship tried to retreat, activating its hyperdrive to escape to faster-than-light speed. The human response was swift and terrible. The ship found itself trapped in a dimensional loop, simultaneously trying to enter hyperspace and never having left normal space. It existed in a permanent state of almost escape, its crew experiencing the horror of fleeing forever while never actually moving. "Your hyperdrive technology is impressive," Chen observed, "but it still relies on the assumption that space and time are constants. We learned to treat them as variables in an equation we can rewrite at will." The remaining Zeltharian ships found themselves unable to move, not because they were physically restrained, but because the concepts of forward and backward had become meaningless in their local area of space. Their engines functioned perfectly but produced no motion because motion itself had been temporarily undefined around them. "I'm going to give you a choice, Admiral," Chen said, her image flickering between dimensions. "You can return to your empire and report what you've seen here. Tell them that humanity is not to be disturbed. Tell them we're not interested in conquest or expansion. We just want to be left alone." "And if the Empire doesn't listen?" Korthak managed to ask. Admiral Chen smiled, and for a moment, her face seemed to exist in 17 different timelines simultaneously. "Admiral, your empire spans 12 systems and controls hundreds of worlds. We exist in 11 dimensions and have made friends with beings that eat ordered reality for breakfast. How do you think that conflict would end?" The dimensional tiers began to close, the impossible ships phasing back into whatever space they had emerged from. The entropy beings withdrew, satisfied for now with the taste of Zeltharian technology they had consumed. Reality began to stabilize around Earth, though the laws of physics would never quite work the same way in this system again. "You have 1 hour to collect your survivors and leave," Chen said as her image began to fade. "Don't come back, and make sure your empire understands why." As the last dimensional tier sealed itself, Admiral Korthak found his ships suddenly able to move again. Around him, space looked normal, but he knew it was an illusion. Humanity had just demonstrated that they could rewrite the fundamental laws of existence as easily as changing numbers in an equation. He began composing his report to the Empire, though he doubted anyone would believe what he had witnessed. "How do you explain to a galactic?" The emergency session of the Zeltharian High Council convened within hours of Admiral Korthak's garbled transmission from the human system. Emperor Vexitar sat upon his crystal throne, reading the report for the 3rd time, his ancient face growing, more disturbed with each paragraph. "Dimensional weapons," he said aloud, his voice echoing in the vast council chamber. "Ships that exist in multiple realities simultaneously. Beings from between dimensions that consume ordered matter." He looked up at the assembled council members. "Are we to believe this fantasy?" High Counselor Mextra, the Empire's chief military strategist, stood to address the chamber. "Your Magnificence, Admiral Korthak is one of our most reliable commanders. He has never filed a false report in 2 centuries of service. But this—" She gestured to the holographic display showing excerpts from the Admiral's transmission. "This defies every law of physics we know." The display showed blurry images, captured by the surviving ship's sensors. Reality itself seemed broken in the footage. Ships that existed in impossible geometries, space that folded in on itself, weapons that fired consequences instead of projectiles. Several council members had to look away as the images caused physical discomfort. "Perhaps the humans have discovered some form of advanced illusion technology," suggested Science Minister Velkoth. "Mass hallucinations, holographic deceptions designed to make their primitive weapons appear more threatening." "Illusions. Don't destroy ships, Minister." Admiral Korthak's voice came through the communication system. He was still in the human system, his fleet reduced to 6 vessels from the original 12. "I watched the cruiser Stellar Dominion cease to exist, not destroyed. It simply stopped being real. Our quantum computers can't even process what happened, because it violates the basic mathematics of existence." Emperor Vextar stood, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. "Even if we accept this impossible report, these humans have shown aggression against the Empire. They cannot be allowed to threaten our supremacy." "Your Magnificence," Korthak's voice carried a note of desperation. "They're not threatening our supremacy. They're demonstrating that our supremacy is an illusion. We are insects trying to understand gods." The Emperor's 4 arms gestured angrily. "Gods! These are the same primitive beings who use chemical propulsion and electromagnetic communications. Admiral, you will return to Imperial space immediately for psychological evaluation." But before Korthak could respond, the chamber's massive holographic display activated without anyone touching the controls. The image of Admiral Chen appeared, her human features calm, but her presence somehow filling the enormous room despite being transmitted across dozens of light years. Emperor Vextar, she said, her voice carrying clearly through speakers that hadn't been programmed to receive outside signals. I thought we should talk. Security alarms began blaring throughout the Imperial Palace. The transmission was impossible. No known technology could penetrate the Empire's quantum-encrypted communication networks, and certainly no signal could travel instantaneously across interstellar distances. "How are you doing this?" Emperor Vexatar demanded. "Your Magnificence learns quickly," Chen replied. "This conversation is happening in 11-dimensional space, where distance is largely meaningless. I'm speaking to you from my ship, which is currently orbiting Earth, but I'm also speaking to you from locations that exist in yesterday and tomorrow. Impossible." "So your people keep saying." Admiral Chen leaned forward and her image seemed to step out of the display into the chamber itself. Several council members fled as the human projection walked among them, her form flickering between solid and translucent. "Your Magnificence, let me be very clear. We don't want to fight your empire. We never did. We just want to be left alone. You attacked our fleet. We defended ourselves against an invasion force that came to exterminate us," Chen corrected. "But I'm not here to argue about who started what. I'm here to prevent this from escalating into something that would be bad for everyone in the galaxy." Emperor Vextar drew himself up to his full height, towering over the human projection. "You dare threaten the Zeltharian Empire? We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 of your years. Our fleets number in the millions of ships. Our weapons can destroy stars." "Your Magnificence," Chen said gently, "you're thinking too small." She gestured, and the chamber's display changed to show space around the Imperial capital world. But the view was wrong. It showed Zelth Prime from angles that couldn't exist, as if the camera was somehow positioned inside several different dimensions simultaneously. "This is your throne world, as it appears to us," Chen explained. "We can see it from dimensions your people don't even know exist. Your orbital defense platforms, your quantum shield generators, your entire fleet, all of it exists in only 3 dimensions." The display zoomed in to show the Imperial Palace itself, but the view penetrated walls and shields as if they weren't there. The chamber where the High Council sat was visible from impossible angles, showing the council members as they truly were, terrified beings confronting something beyond their comprehension. "Your defenses are impressive," Chen continued, "but they only protect you from attacks that come from normal space. We could disable every ship in your fleet without them ever seeing us coming. We could walk through your quantum barriers as if they were made of light." High Counselor Mextra found her voice. "What do you want?" "Peace," Chen replied immediately. "We want your empire to leave us alone. Don't send more fleets to human space. Don't attempt to conquer or destroy us. In return, we'll stay in our corner of the galaxy and pretend this conversation never happened." "And if we refuse?" Emperor Vexatar asked. Admiral Chen's projection flickered, and for a moment she seemed to exist as dozens of different versions of herself, each representing a possible future. "Your Magnificence, I truly hope you don't ask me to demonstrate the alternatives." But the Emperor's pride would not allow him to back down before what he still saw as a primitive species. "The Empire has never surrendered to inferiors. We will not begin now." "I was afraid you'd say that." The lights in the council chamber began to dim, but not from any electrical failure. Reality itself was becoming less bright, less solid. The walls started to shift, showing glimpses of other times and places. Some council members found themselves momentarily experiencing memories that weren't their own. "This is a very small demonstration," Chen explained, as physics slowly broke down around them. "We're temporarily expanding this chamber into 4-dimensional space. Nothing dangerous. You're just experiencing what it's like to exist in one additional dimension." Several council members collapsed as their minds tried to process sensory input from a direction that didn't exist. Others began speaking in languages they'd never learned, accessing knowledge from parallel versions of themselves. "Stop this!" Emperor Vextar commanded. Though his own voice sounded strange as it echoed through dimensions, his ears weren't designed to hear. Of course. Admiral Chen gestured, and reality snapped back to normal. The council members who had collapsed slowly picked themselves up, their eyes wide with terror and wonder. That was just 4 dimensions, Your Magnificence. We routinely work in 11. The Emperor sank back onto his throne, the implications finally becoming clear. If humanity could manipulate reality this easily, then the Empire's military superiority meant nothing. Their weapons, their shields, their entire technological advantage was based on a 3-dimensional understanding of warfare. What you experienced just now, Chen continued, was the equivalent of showing an ant what it's like to perceive depth. Now imagine trying to fight an enemy that could see and attack from dimensions you can't even comprehend. How? Whispered Science Minister Velkoth. How did your species develop such technology? Admiral Chen smiled sadly. Minister, your people made the same mistake that every advanced civilization makes. You assumed that technological progress meant building bigger guns, faster ships, stronger shields. You perfected 3-dimensional technology until you couldn't imagine anything beyond it. She paused, her image becoming more solid as she focused her attention on the council. Humans took a different approach. When we first detected signals from galactic civilization, we realized we were centuries behind in conventional technology. We couldn't compete with your ships or weapons, so instead of trying to catch up, we decided to change the rules of the game entirely. We spent 50 years learning to think outside reality itself. While your empire refined fusion power, we learned to manipulate the forces that make fusion possible. While you built faster-than-light drives, we learned to step outside the concept of distance. While you created energy shields, we befriended beings that treat energy as food. Emperor Vexitar stared at the human projection, finally understanding the scope of his empire's mistake. You were never primitive. This was all deception. Not deception, Your Magnificence. Misdirection. We let you see what you expected to see, a young species playing with simple tools. We never lied about our technology. We just didn't mention that we were working on something else entirely. The chamber fell silent as the full implications sank in. The Empire had encountered a species that had learned to operate outside the normal. Emperor Vextar's response came 3 days later, delivered through official diplomatic channels to every human colony simultaneously. The message was brief and filled with the arrogance that had defined the Zeltharian Empire for millennia. The Empire does not negotiate with primitives. We do not retreat from inferiors. You will submit or be destroyed. This is final. Admiral Chen read the message while standing on the observation deck of humanity's newest vessel, the Probability Storm. Around her, the ship existed in 17 different configurations simultaneously, each one adapted for warfare in a different dimensional layer. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see Earth rotating peacefully below, unaware that the fate of the galaxy was about to be decided. They chose poorly, said Dr. Sarah Kim, humanity's chief dimensional theorist. Kim had been one of the original scientists who first detected the spaces between realities, and her work had made everything that followed possible. I almost hoped they would be reasonable. No, Chen replied, watching the blue world turn. They couldn't be reasonable. Their entire civilization is built on the assumption that they're the strongest force in the galaxy. Admitting we could defeat them would mean admitting their whole empire is built on a lie. She activated the ship's communication system, speaking into microphones that would carry her words to every human vessel scattered across 11 dimensions of space. This is Admiral Chen, to all fleet commanders. The Emperor has made his choice. Begin Phase 2. Across the galaxy, reality began to tear. The first dimensional rifts opened in the Zeltharian home system, appearing without warning around Zelth Prime itself. The planet's orbital defense platforms fired into the tiers, but their weapons simply passed through into empty space between dimensions. The rifts widened, and through them came humanity's true fleet. These weren't the impossible vessels that had fought Admiral Korthak's battle group. These were humanity's actual military ships, designed and built in dimensional spaces where the normal rules of construction didn't apply. Each one was the size of a small moon, but somehow contained the interior volume of entire solar systems. The ships existed in a state of controlled impossibility. Their hulls were made from crystallized time, making them immune to any weapon that relied on cause and effect. Their weapons fired pure mathematics, equations that rewrote the local laws of physics to achieve whatever result the human commanders desired. But most terrifying were the crews. Humanity's dimensional research had changed them, evolved them, beyond recognition. They existed simultaneously across multiple timelines, communicating with past and future versions of themselves. Some had learned to think in 11 dimensions, their consciousness spread across realities that normal minds couldn't comprehend. Captain Maria Santos commanded the lead vessel, the Causality Engine. She had volunteered for the first dimensional enhancement experiments 20 years ago, and now existed as a living bridge between normal space and the chaos beyond. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics from dimensions that had no names. Zelth. "Prime Defense Command," she transmitted. "This is humanity's response to your Emperor's ultimatum. Observe." One of the human ships targeted the largest Zeltharian battle station. Instead of firing conventional weapons, it fired a single equation, a mathematical formula that redefined the relationship between matter and energy in the battle station's local space. The massive station didn't explode. It simply became something else. Its metal transformed into crystallized music, its energy systems became abstract art, and its crew experienced their memories backward while simultaneously living their deaths in reverse. The station continued to exist, but as something that belonged in a universe with completely different physical laws. What you just witnessed, Captain Santos explained, is a dimensional conversion weapon. We didn't destroy your station. We translated it into a reality where it can't threaten anyone. The crew is unharmed, but exists now in a dimension where violence is impossible. Emperor Vextar watched from his palace as his most powerful defenses were casually neutralized by weapons that didn't even follow the basic rules of warfare. His quantum shields, designed to stop any known form of attack, were useless against enemies who attacked from directions that didn't exist. "Your Magnificence," High Counselor Mextra said, her voice shaking. "We must surrender. We cannot fight beings who control reality itself." "Never," the Emperor snarled, his pride overwhelming his reason. "Activate the Star Killer. If we cannot defeat them, we'll destroy their home world." The Star Killer was the Empire's ultimate weapon, a device that could cause a star to go supernova, destroying everything in the system. It had been used only twice in the Empire's history, both times to make examples of species that had dared to resist Zeltharian rule. The weapon fired, sending a pulse of exotic energy toward Earth's sun. The pulse was designed to destabilize the nuclear fusion at the star's core, causing a cascade reaction that would turn Sul into a supernova within hours. The pulse reached the sun and simply stopped existing. "Interesting weapon," Admiral Chen's voice came through the palace's communication systems. "But you're still thinking in 3 dimensions, Your Magnificence. We saw that pulse coming yesterday and prepared countermeasures tomorrow." The Emperor stared at the tactical displays, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. His ultimate weapon had simply been edited out of existence before it could reach its target. "Let me show you what real power looks like," Chen continued. Space around Zelth Prime began to change. Not violently. There were no explosions or energy discharges. Reality simply became more flexible. The laws of physics started treating themselves as suggestions rather than absolutes. Gravity became optional in some areas. Time moved backward in others. Colors that had never existed before painted themselves across the sky. We're rewriting the fundamental constants of your local space, Chen explained, as Zeltharian ships found themselves unable to function in areas where the speed of light had been changed to the speed of thought. This isn't an attack. It's a demonstration. We're showing you what happens when a species that thinks in 11 dimensions decides to redecorate a 3-dimensional space. The changes spread beyond Zelth Prime to other worlds in the system. On the industrial world of Mektar, gravity reversed itself, causing cities to fall upward into the sky before being caught and gently lowered back down. On the agricultural world of Velsun, time began moving at different speeds in different locations, creating zones where crops could be planted and harvested in minutes. None of it was harmful, but all of it was impossible. The Empire was witnessing the casual restructuring of reality by beings who had learned to think beyond the universe itself. "Your Magnificence," Admiral Chen said. "You have one final chance to reconsider. Withdraw your forces from human space. Acknowledge our right to exist without interference, and we'll restore normal physics to your territory." Emperor Vexitar looked around his throne room, where the walls now showed glimpses of parallel realities where the Zeltharian Empire had never existed. In some of those realities, he could see himself as a simple farmer. In others, his species had never evolved at all. The message was clear. Humanity could reach across dimensions to edit the very history of the Empire if they chose to. "What guarantee do we have," he asked, his voice barely audible, "that you won't use this power to conquer the galaxy yourselves?" "None," Chen replied honestly. "But Your Magnificence, if we wanted to conquer the galaxy, we would have already done so. We could have rewritten history so that the Zeltharian Empire never existed. We could have made it so that your species evolved as our servants instead of our enemies. The fact that you're still here, still ruling your empire, should tell you something about our intentions." The Emperor sat in silence for long minutes, watching reality shift around his throne room. Finally, he spoke. "The Empire withdraws from human space. Your species will be left alone, as you requested." "Thank you, Your Magnificence. That was a wise decision." Space around Zelth Prime began to return to normal. The impossible colors faded from the sky. Gravity resumed its normal behavior, and time started flowing forward at its regular pace. The human fleet phased back into whatever dimensional space they had emerged from, leaving only the memory of their presence. But the Empire had been changed forever. Word spread quickly through the galactic communication networks about the species that had forced the mighty Zeltharians to surrender without firing a shot. Civilizations that had lived in fear of the Empire for millennia suddenly realized that there was something in the universe more powerful than plasma cannons and quantum shields. Within months, the Empire began to crumble. Species that had been conquered centuries ago declared independence, knowing that the Empire could no longer claim to be the strongest force in the galaxy. Trade agreements were renegotiated. Ancient grudges were settled. The balance of galactic power shifted toward those who could think beyond traditional limitations. Admiral Chen returned to Earth, where she found President Martinez waiting for her in the orbital command center. "It's over?" the president asked.